So we're going to review the functions and their inverses test. So you can look back on your test and you can see which ones you missed, and you can just fast forward through the video, but I do want you to actually look at the ones you missed and see if you can figure out what went wrong. So hopefully next time if you see them, you'll know how to do them. Okay, so number 1 was B. So what transformation would occur to the parent function? So here's your original. You can graph that. It's a V shape and the center is at 0, 0. And you're at this new equation. So notice that new equation, y is not by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 to the other side. So because x plus 3 is inside the absolute value, the plus 2 just goes on the outside. So you can graph this new function, I said that weird, and you can just look at it, but it looks like this. So now the v is at negative 3, 2, so it has moved 2 units up and 3 units to the left. Okay, so then we have this one. Here's your parent function. That one doesn't really matter because you're going to change it to this function, and you're talking about the domain. So if you look at this one, it actually starts right here now at negative 1. So the domain is from negative 1 and anything to the right of negative 1. So notice the way the arrow is pointing to the right, so that's why D is the correct answer choice. This one is talking about a composition of functions. It's also referring to the inverse. It doesn't give you the inverse, so you have to find it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change f of x to y. We're going to switch the x and the y, and then we're going to get the y by itself. So x plus 1 equals 5y. So I'm going to say y equals x plus 1 over 5. And remember, this is the inverse. So the first thing we need to do is plug 2 into the original. So I'm going to replace that x with a 2. So 10 minus 1 is 9. And now I'm going to take 9 and I'm going to plug it into the inverse. So I have 9 plus 1 over 5. 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 divided by 5 is 2. The answer is 2. Number 4, so which value is closest to f to the negative 1? So remember, that is that's the inverse of a function. So if it was like this, the number in the parentheses would be x, but because we're talking about an inverse, and because x and y switch, we're saying y is equal to negative 3, so what is x? So you look on the graph, and which is the only one that would have an x-coordinate of negative 3? It would be that point right there. And when x is negative 3, when y is negative 3, x is negative 6. So the answer is A. Okay, very similar to that last one we just did. Usually, if you're talking about a function, the number in the parentheses is x, but because you're talking about an inverse, negative 2 is actually going to be y. So you look on the chart, and when y is negative 2, x is equal to negative 1. So B. Okay. Remember, f to the negative 1 means inverse, so the first thing we're going to do, well, the only thing we're going to do is find the inverse. So I'm going to change f of x to y. Now I'm going to switch my x and my y, and I'm going to get y by itself. So the only way to get rid of a square root is to square both sides. And the way you get rid of a plus 1, see what I did? I wrote the wrong thing. Okay, the way you get rid of a minus 1 is to add 1. Alright, so that's why the answer is D. Okay, same thing as that last one. We're going to switch f of x to y. We're going to switch our x and our y, and then we're going to get y by itself. So we're going to get rid of a minus 7 by adding, and we're going to get rid of timesing by 3 by dividing by 3. Okay, so that's why the answer choice is B. Okay, this one's a little tricky. If you missed this one, maybe you didn't pay attention to the study guide video so much. I'm going to switch x and y. A little tricky on this one. So to get rid of dividing by 3, you multiply by 3. To get rid of a square root, you square both sides. But when you square both sides, remember you square the 3. 3 squared is 9, and you also square the x, so x squared. Okay, so that's where that 9 is coming from. Now I'm going to subtract 4. And then the last thing I'm going to do is divide by 2. So 9x squared minus 4 divided by 2. Alright, so I'm going to switch my x and my y. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. And then the way I get rid of a square is to take the square root. So So that's why it's answer choice B. You don't really have to change, like, pay any attention to the domains. Okay, this one's talking about regular functions, so not inverse. So x is equal to -3. And remember, if it's an open circle, it doesn't exist there, so you're looking for a closed circle. So the only point on here that's a closed circle that would have an x coordinate of -3 is this one right here, and that point is -4, -3. So when x... I just did that wrong. No, we're good. We're good. Sorry. Confused myself. I just wrote it wrong. Okay, that's what happened. So when x is -3, y is -4. That's why the answer is A. Sorry, I'm doing this really fast, not thinking about it. Okay, which of the following has its only 0 at x equals -4? Just graph it. If you graph C, it looks like this. And so it hits the x-axis at -4. This one's tricky. So we talked about this one in the study guide. So the total cost for a taxi ride includes an initial fee of $250 plus an additional charge of $150 for each mile or part of a mile. Because it says part of a mile, it's not going to be C or D. Those are linear functions. So if we had to pay $2.50 plus $1.50 for each mile, anything between 0 and 1 miles would be $4. So, right here, between 0 and 1 miles, you're going to pay $4. That's why it's answer choice B. That one's pretty tricky, I think. This one's not too bad. Piecewise function, you work 48 hours. So you would use the first one if your hours were between 0 and 40, but you are bigger than 40, so you're going to take this function, and you're going to replace that h with the number 48. And then, when you do that, you get 416, so it's B. Another piecewise, I'm going to color code it a little bit. Okay, so f of -3, x is less than or equal to -3, so it's going to go in the first one. When you plug this in, make sure you're putting parentheses around that -3, or you're going to get the wrong thing. Okay, so for the first one, we got -15 plus 2 times. So for f of -1, I circled it in blue. That falls into the second category because -1 is between -3 and 4. So I'm going to plug this in. I get 18. Alright, and then the last one, it says f of 4. So I circled it in green because it's going to go into the last one. So I'm going to replace x with 4. Alright, and remember, when you do this one, you're going to do the top first and then the bottom. Alright, and then put all this junk in your calculator and you would get 22. Alright, moving on. Alright, this is the last one. Not the last one, just kidding. So this one's talking about inverse. So go ahead and find the inverse of that function. Okay, so I found the inverse really fast. I left it in a really ugly form, but it's just super easy. So this is the number that we're going to plug in for x. Alright, so I'm going to replace this x right here with -3. And I'm going to put that in my calculator. Make sure you put parentheses around a fraction always. And you're going to get 4.5. Moving on. Alright. This one's talking about minimum value. All you got to do is graph it. And the minimum value occurs right here at D. This one is talking about, so you have this, and then you're going to replace it with a 4. So you just graph this one and you tell me what happened. So now it looks like this, and it definitely moved to the right. Okay, I mean, I think this one's pretty easy. If it's going to shift to the right 7 units, it's going to be -7 inside. If it's going to shift up, it's going to be +2. Or you could graph this and graph that one, and then see if it actually shifted up. It did. It's D. Okay, this one, I'm going to get the absolute value bars by themselves, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And now I'm going to pretend that's a negative 1, and I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. And then I'm going to make this into two different problems. One of them is going to be equal to positive 36. The other is going to be equal to negative 36. Okay, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. This one, same thing. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And I'm going to divide by 8. Or you can just plug those answer choices in and see which one works. Okay, I'm going to color code this one. Okay, so you plug these in, you get those numbers, and then you do the thing. Okay, so negative 9 minus what you got for the green one, negative 31, plus what you got for the red one, which was 7, and so you get 29. Okay, this one's talking about composition of functions. So remember, if the first function is f, it goes on the outside. Alright, so we're going to take the g function and we're going to plug it in right here. So if you don't remember from Math 1, anytime you have a quantity squared, you have to write it twice, and then you distribute it, or you FOIL it together. So x squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1 plus 1. Get your like terms together, you get x squared plus 2x plus 2. That's why it's 8. Okay, this one's, it's a piecewise. It's tricky because you're going to plug it into the same piecewise twice. So when you so you plug in the first one, you get negative 13 plus 3 times. You plug in the last one, you get negative 14, and then you're going to get negative 55. Okay, so these actually match like this. So it's positive from negative 4 to negative 1 because it's above the x-axis. It's negative from 0 to 2 because it's below the x-axis. It's increasing from 0 to 4 because it's going up. And then I'll do another color. It's decreasing from negative 2 to 0 because it's going down. Alright, last one. You just need to look at your chart that we talked about in class. It's D.